We're moving on to digest all of this wisdom, and who better to do it with? Brian Baglow, managing editor, Pocket Gamer, who's going to be our moderator with his great panel. What lessons have we learned from our game economy mistakes? Just a couple points here of who you have. You have Dmitri Pimenov, Chief Operating Officer at Nekki. Nekki's known for, of course, action and strategy games. We have Peeyush Gulati, Production Manager Lead at Ubisoft, Abu Dhabi. Chloe Cave, I hope I'm saying it properly, Publisher Partnerships Director at Admix, known as a pioneer in in-play advertising, and Michal Minarik, Game Design Specialist, SuperScale, great, amazing, award-winning growth partner for top-grossing mobile games. I've set it up for you, Brian. Take it away.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Peggy. Taking away a very large part of the hassle of actually introducing everybody. Hi, folks. Thank you so much for hanging around and coming to the final panel of the afternoon, where we're going to be kind of summarizing everything that's happened so far and trying to figure out what we've learned from some of the failures that we've seen in game economies. So I was going to ask you all to introduce yourselves, but Peggy has done a pretty comprehensive job there. So folks, thank you very much indeed for agreeing to be part of this. We're going to keep things moving quite quickly because I think we are all that is standing between our audience and food, drinks, and getting on with the rest of their day. So first of all, I think let's set the scene. Okay, let's be honest. Video games have had to change hugely in the last 10 years. When I started back in the olden days, there was a single retail model or a single business model, and that was retail. If you wanted to play a game, you had to buy it first. And of course, that's no longer the case. So let's kick off. Where are we now as a sector? Is it all freemium? Is it all, have we found different ways of realizing value from people? Where would you say that the sort of the status quo is at the moment? I'll pick on people just to begin with. Chloe, let's start with you, if we could, please.
Sure. I've been in the gaming industry for like 8 years now. I joined when the time that Apple literally started, doing advertising in apps. So I'm really familiar with this model. I believe that's still like the mainstream at the moment. Only 4% of the users are actually like the big whales buying purchase, etc. So I guess that's where we are. And yeah, what about other guys' thoughts?
Yeah, let's open this up. So Michal, sorry, am I pronouncing that correctly, first of all?
Yeah, feel free to call me Mike or Michael, the English version, but it's Michal, but it's okay. Yeah, so the huge shift, like the major change was done when the free-to-play model was invented compared to the premium/premium model. And then we have seen the evolvement of the ads and the in-app purchases as the core things, but now we see like a smaller upgrades inside of the monetization. So monetization techniques like subscriptions at Battle Pass, which a few years ago was not known, but now, in my opinion, it's the standard in every games. And on the other hand, the evolvement is continuing with like a data monetization. So some games and applications are collecting data that they are selling, and that's their business model, or like a paid surveys, or even the crypto NFT space, which is like crazy now.
We are coming back to that. I guarantee you, we are coming back to that. Thank you. And so I guess, Peeyush, what's the sort of the dominant model? We've got subscriptions, we've got in-app purchases, we've got advertising. Where are we right now?
I think the market is changing. I mean, over the last 2 decades, because I've been working on free-to-play for more than 15 years, and what I see, even within free-to-play, the industry has evolved from unlimited from limited play time on free-to-play model to more limited play time and diminishing returns now. And if you try to have a look at the last 10 years, a lot of practices from East are being acceptable in West. Back in the days, chess boxes and gachas were predominantly in East, but now it's becoming a trend in Western markets also. And especially with we'll definitely discuss about NFTs, but as the Gen Z audience is increasing more and more, monetization is also shifting a lot towards vanity, where players are acceptable to spend money on just vanity stuff. I mean, Fortnite is an excellent example with lots of vanity selling. So it's a mix of everything, but a lot of paths to diverge on depending upon the game and the product that you're working on.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You made a really good point about the skins and the vanity items, because that's something that, like, in my opinion, only recently, like in the recent few years, we see as a main monetization, which previously was not. Like, usually the progress, what or the gameplay was what was monetized, but just showing off, you know, the skins and vanity items. That's really interesting shift.
That's a great point, and we're going to come back to that again when we come to NFTs and blockchain, because customization is clearly where we're going with a lot of this. Dmitri, can we get your thoughts just on this? You know,
yeah, sure. So I'm not a big expert on NFT, but I've been in game development for about 8 or 9 years, and I've witnessed with my company how the monetization has changed from selling energy to loot boxes and now to battle passes and so on. And because we are making action games, we strongly believe that future games will become more and more multi-platform, like console and mobile experiences like Fortnite, Genshin Impact, and so on. And the trend that I'm currently seeing is monetization becoming more voluntary, if I should say it, you know, like without paywalls, and more focused maybe on cosmetic items and vanity items, and on something that you really shouldn't need to have to progress in the game.
Wonderful. Yeah, that makes a great deal of sense. So listen, we're here to talk about game economies and what happens when they go horribly wrong. But are there examples out there, and feel free to pick your own games. Give me an example of game economies which have worked, which, you know, do exactly what they should do or have revolutionized this area. Are there any titles you can point us towards?
Yeah, I can start.
Go for it.
I think, yeah, okay. Thank you. I think that SuperScale does quite an amazing job on their projects. Actually, they're usually referenced in mobile free-to-play. They made a huge impact on loot boxes system. And also everybody was looking at their results as they introduced battle passes in their game. And actually, while playing their games, I think that they're done quite well in terms of economy, because everything works. There's nothing that you don't use, and you always have some inner urge to buy their coins and so on. So I think their games, especially Clash Royale, I think they're great in this matter.
Good stuff. Any other examples from the other panelists?
Peeyush, this side. I think it's very important when we talk about game economies to measure a game in long term, because that's the point when you start seeing the impacts of economy. Personally, I classify the games into closed and open economies, and I completely agree with Dmitri here. Some of the games from SuperScale, Clash of Clans for me is one of the excellent examples of a closed economy game, which over I think close to a decade or 8-9 years has evolved, and they're still day by day solving their problems, because that's the point where the economies are getting bigger and the resources are in the game itself are increasing. And for more open economies, I think EVE Online is still one of the good examples. It has its own learnings and mistakes, and it's a lot of drama all around. But that's one of the byproducts of an open economy game, that you cannot predict and control it. But certainly, I would suggest EVE Online also as one of the good games to look at.
Fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. I would add that it really depends on the economy type. So we have heard about the open economies. We have heard about the like a gacha plus league progression as a Clash Royale. But then what I see, there is also a merge economies, like a merge dragons, where it is really part of core gameplay and the economy is built around that. There can be also the idle economies, like adventure communist, and for sure like classic saga games with the winner of Candy Crush saga. And I'm sure there's some type of economy that I missed out, but in my opinion, this is like the basic types of economy that we see currently in the top grossing games.
Yeah, just quickly to add here.
Yes.
Despite all like different, economy, I think as long as we get the balance right and to keep players happy, then it's a good economy from our perspective.
And I think this is one of the crucial things, because there can be economies in games which operate, they're effective at generating revenue, but they're not necessarily loved by the players. We've had some examples from fairly large publishers who have been accused of nickel and diming players to death. We won't name names yet. We'll leave that towards the end. But a successful economy should a successful economy satisfy both the operator, the publisher, developer, and the audience, or is the audience's happiness very much secondary, as long as they are prepared to shell out, shall we say?
I think from what we've seen so far is users understand the game is free, and they understand developers have to make money. That's the way, and then they know they need to be monetized in a way. But as long as there's a balance, as long as they can play games more than actually watching ads, then they're happy. So I think it's to find the best practices for your games and find the right balance, and then both sides can be happy.
Fantastic, thank you, Chloe. And is this something that we're seeing an awful lot more? You've all mentioned, a number of different approaches, and this whole idea of a hybrid economy seems to be one that's becoming more and more prevalent. So you're not necessarily just watching adverts, you're not necessarily just getting in-app purchases. We're starting to see, I think, game creators becoming a little more sophisticated about how they introduce monetization and how they build an economy within a game. Does that strike a chord with you guys? Anyone? Thumbs up? Okay, good stuff. So moving on, one of the questions that comes out of that is going to be for game creators, for game publishers, is this something that has to be built in from the outset? Do you have to design the game around the economy, or can you build a game and then figure out at the end how it's going to monetize and how people are going to give you value as they play it?
This is a really important and good question. So first of all, the monetization, in my opinion, I'm caring for a game design and monetization, and in my opinion, in the free-to-play market, it is the same thing. So you can design a good core gameplay, but then as you want to pack on other features, you have to know what is the core monetization. Actually, Candy Crush Saga started as an online game, if I remember right, and it was you just play one level by another without any monetization, and they were thinking how can they push this into really like a good progression and stuff like that, and so they had a good core gameplay and they continued evolving it with the economy and with the monetization. So I see a lot of like indie small studios making a mistake. Actually, I've heard one studio told that we will figure out monetization later, and that's one of the biggest mistakes that a studio can make.
That's great. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would second Mike here, American name. So I'm certainly, I think it's very hard to put bolts of game economy on top of an existing game. It has to be tied really within the framework of your core gameplay. It should closely relate to player motivation. You can certainly generate revenues if you try to bolt it up for a short term. But again, in long term, if it's not tied within the core loop and doesn't satisfy the player motivation, and if the resources and all the sinks and faucets are not thought about, it's definitely going to end up having leaks at the end of the day.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Dmitri, given the focus of your company, I mean, obviously, are you looking at more of the sort of the premium game approach, or have you guys been forced to change your mind? Have you ever sort of been halfway through and decided actually this model doesn't fit this particular title?
Actually, we've always been working with free-to-play and premium. We forgot about it like 10 years ago. And in terms of making monetization, I began to think that it's really a changing market, and players become tired of some monetization loops, like loot boxes and the Clash Royale when it was released, and so on. So you may bolt on the monetization later, but you have to think about the valuables that your game has. By valuables, I mean something in your core gameplay that is desired by players. Like if you're making a shooter, you have to sell like guns and everything about guns, something that's visible by the player, and it will sell well. And the things like stat increases that are invisible to the player, he can see it in the game, will be sold worse. So I think if you plan to bolt on the monetization later, you have to start with thinking about the valuables your core gameplay loop has. I hope you understand what I mean.
I do indeed. And this is something that I guess it comes back to is, what are the most common mistakes that you see out there when developers and publishers are creating an economy? Do they, are they just charging ahead and using the old models? Are they making assumptions? Where are they tripping themselves up? We'll come to you first, Chloe, if I could.
Yeah, sure. What we've seen is they haven't done enough tests. Because there are so many different formats on the market, and of course there's like mainstream ones like rewarded videos, then there might be because I'm playing many games on a daily basis, and there's like some games I watch a video without getting any rewards. And because I'm in this industry, so I understand that. But for players, they just don't understand if it's a rewarded video, how come I don't get any rewards? And just feels like it's very enforced. So I think running one of the best practices would be run out of tests and find out the behavior of your players. And I'm just going to share a quick result here. We actually done a survey earlier this year asking our publishers what kind of ad formats they like. And there's like so many different mainstream ones. The first one's rewarded video. I don't know if Dmitri and Piyosh is going to agree on this one. And second one, they say is actually in play, which is like non-intrusive and user-friendly. I might sound a bit biased here, but just sharing the results here.
Fantastic. Peeyush.
I think some of the common mistakes or at least things that one should remember, I'd like to point out three of them particularly. One is creating goods that last forever in the game, except it's vanity. So one has to be very careful about that. Second one is especially, with more RPG or 4X strategy games or let's say more hardcore games, the scaling of numbers become infinite at some point of time. For a player who's level 1 versus player who's level 100, and then player level who's 500, you cannot keep just scaling the numbers infinitely, because they at some point of time they are ridiculous, and that's something to be taught from the ground start. And a very common one, never having one currency for all, having a clear segregation between what are your soft points and what is your soft currency and what is your hard currency, trying to bridge them. So these are three common mistakes that I think one should avoid when it comes to looking at game economies.
That's a fantastic answer.
These are amazing points. There is just one point that I would like to add, and it's yeah, it's the spending depth. So the years, somebody mentioned it here, that's like Clash of Clans, it's, I don't know, 10 or 9 years out. And so these games are designed to be played for years, and the economy and everything around the game has to withstand that. And it's not about the economy, it's also about the spending, like the payments in the game. So there will come players that would like to spend thousands in a game, and all of this has to be designed around that. And I see many game studios like being afraid of this.
Certainly, just one thing to add here is that it's very important to understand also the purchasing power of your players, and or the amount that you expect them to spend. $10 for a player at the start of the game should mean a certain progress, but but a $10 for a player at the later point of the game also needs to be respected. You cannot just infinitely scale a particular spending for a player in 1 year to say, okay, now he needs to spend $1,000 if he needs to keep up. As game developers, we also need to respect the spending powers of the audience.
I find this absolutely fascinating because, again, we talk so often about minnows and whales, but you're absolutely right. It's respecting the player, whatever their entry level and regardless of their experience level, because otherwise you are penalizing or excluding people who would otherwise be engaging within your game economy. And it's the notion of scarcity is something that you mentioned, Peeyush, that I want to come back to as we touch on NFTs and blockchain, because obviously if you just keep creating in-game content, at some point it will devalue what it is that you're actually creating. So let's look at this with our blockchain and NFT hats on. You're all experts, you're all looking at what's going on in the market on an ongoing basis. Is the introduction of blockchain economies happening right now? And if so, how is that going to transform the economies of gaming?
I like to pick on this one. I mean, it's
Please do.
quite interesting, and I personally believe it's a learning experience at this point of time. Although we still have some great examples. I mean, as far as I remember, it started with CryptoKitties, and then the Sandbox, and Axie Infinity, and lately there is this game called Blanco's Block Party. That recently, it's still in alpha stage and introduced NFTs, and it did quite well in the pre-alpha stage. I mean, one of the things that it's still unknown or uncertain is the legislation or the governance of these economies. Because yes, you are ending up trading things outside the world, and the model of gaming is changing from free to play to more play to earn now, because that's the mindset that these games are bringing in with NFTs integration. I mean, any free to play game that is having NFTs is kind of bringing the concept play and earn money. But again, this all is not legislated right now and ungoverned. I mean, still a very interesting model, but I would say something to still explore in coming years.
I find that absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much, Peeyush. Michal.
Yeah, I see like a lot of innovation going in the NFT and crypto space currently, which means that we will see many of the companies and games fail actually, because on the free-to-play, we have verified economy types, as we were discussing. So if you are making a new game, you can just use something which is existing. But with a NFT, it's an open type of economy, so everybody is interacting together on an open market, and therefore the rules need to be adjusted. And we see like many games with the prices of the items or of the like token really going up and then going down, since many of the users want to earn on that. So this is not the best case in my opinion, but we will see games and studios that will like figure it out what is the best way. And actually, it was like a week or 2 weeks ago, the French So Rare, the company is called So Rare. They raised like crazy amount of money, like almost $700 million. which I have, like, I do not remember any other comparable race. And so I analyzed the game, and I really see they were able to build a sustainable economy on the blockchain, which is contrary to many others, because it's a card collector's game connected to the fantasy football, which means that there will be new cards coming in and the old leaving the ecosystem. So it also explains why the crazy valuation.
That's fantastic. And we're going to come back to that idea of ownership in just a second. Dmitri, is there anything you would like to add?
Yes, thank you. I agree with Michal. And also, I'd like to add that I personally think that NFTs are kind of a little bit overhyped at the moment. And I think it's more the technology of the coming future. It's good that some companies research it at the moment, because it will it will make a ground for the future companies. But I think the NFTs really will come into play if we'll have something like metaverses that Mark Zuckerberg was talking about, because the value behind NFTs is them being persistent and unchangeable. And if you have games that have like a post-launch period about 5 years, NFTs are not quite usable here. So I think it's still the technology of the future. And also I agree with Pieyush, who said that there are some problems with government regulation at the moment, and also the app stores not liking this system very much. So I think it's kind of like 5 or 10 years ahead of us.
Interesting. And Chloe, do you have any thoughts on this area?
Yeah, this is actually a very hot topic internally. Yeah, it's just those like crazy investments, just wow. Like Pieyush mentioned before, the next generations, they grow up in these environments, and this is just the way they interact, right, online, like the metaverse. And we believe that all the transactions that you do in real life would happen digitally. And that's how NFT and blockchain would play a big part. Agree with Dmitri as well. Technology-wise, like how long are we going to take, for the whole industry to make it work? But I would say that this is very exciting. Yeah, just where we are.
Agreed. I think there are so many questions around this area at the moment. We have people out there who are immensely skeptical of the entire concept of blockchain or NFTs, all the way through to companies, as you said, Michal, raising vast amounts of money, focusing very much on an NFT-based economy. But for me, the key question there was, I think you mentioned it as well, Dmitri, is this idea of legislation. Because if somebody is purchasing an item and they have that sense of ownership, then it really could limit what the company, the creator of the object, the item, is allowed to do. In the past, developers and publishers felt free to close down games which were not performing, economically, not hitting targets. But if they have an entire player base who own items, then we may well start running into ideas of legislation. And so I'm going to ask you, are there any sort of moves that you've been hearing about? Are there any governments out there that have started to look seriously at legislating or regulating the use of blockchain within games? Anyone aware of that? I'm going to take that as a no.
Generally, seeing regulations, I believe it's just ideas about how should the crypto space work, but it is always related to the investments and tokens, and not actually to the games yet, but for sure it will come someday.
So we have one question from the audience, which is, given the complexity of NFTs, do you think it's going to become mainstream enough that any player from any background will understand it enough to be comfortable making a purchase? Would anyone like to pick that?
I believe it will be I don't know if dominant, but like a significant part of gaming industry. And the question is just how will it look like? I can really imagine like different types of economies, or I don't know, how should I call it? So one could be, as So Rare is doing, like a collectors. Then I can see something that is already working with the skins, but actually on the blockchain, you know, there are different games are using different technology, but this is something that easily can become a standard. And then I can see like an economy build, like a 2 tiers of players, let's say. So there will be like owners of the game. So owning, let's say, land plots in the game, and then players who will use that, maybe even pay for it. But that's my thoughts, and we will see how that evolves.
That's very interesting, and again it comes back to the notion of ownership. And are we going to see you know, subletting and generations of capitalists in the virtual realm capitalizing on being first into some of these virtual spaces? And I don't think we need to wait for the metaverse for this to happen. We're already seeing it in a lot of the online spaces like the sandbox. But I guess one of the key questions that leaps out of that is this sense of ownership. Who is it that's actually going to end up owning the game content, whether it's vanity items, customization, whether it's something valuable like virtual real estate? Do we see any examples out there of games that are doing this already, that are doing this right, that are really starting to open things up as a proper economy based on blockchain?
Like the first that comes to my mind is the Gala games. They are more of a platform, but the games that are being like many of the games are still in development, but and they are in development, and they are already selling the content of the game. So first of all, it helps them raise money for the development. Sure. And on the other hand, it is, as you explained, that there will be players owning, I suppose, big part of the game. So, I mean, I think Mirandus is one of the biggest on the Gala platform, and they raised tens of millions through the selling of the NFTs, maybe even hundreds of millions. I did not calculate that.
Phenomenal. Thank you.
Definitely.
It's going to be an interesting few years in game economies. One more question from the audience is, do you have any of you have any horror stories from your journey on the learning curve for game economies? Have you seen anything out there that genuinely made you blanch?
I'll share one just quickly.
Please, Chloe, yes.
I was playing a casual game before, and within a level, every single action I do, there was a rewarded video. So to finish one level, I think I spent probably over 2-3 minutes. So at the end, I deleted the game because it's just not playable. Mm-hmm. Yeah, not my own game, but I think that's quite a story to share here.
Yes, I'm familiar with the type. It is where they've clearly not done any kind of user testing, and it's just, let's just milk this for everything that we can. Anyone else?
We cooperated with the studio. It was a few years ago, and they came to us that, oh, guys, we have a problem with the monetization. How can we increase the LTV? And so when we played the game, in the store, they had a button which was literally called buy everything, and it costed 10 euros. So this is like a contrary on, like an example how not to monetize.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Well, we're heading towards the end of our time. So I've got another few questions for you guys. So when we look at the sort of the market as a whole, is this a sector that's fragmenting or consolidating? Are we starting to see companies go off in multiple different directions, multiple different providers and platforms? Or are we starting to see this kind of consolidate into, you know, models and providers that are growing?
I mean, I think it's kind of mixed. I mean, still there's a big dominance from Google and Apple on store fronts. The markets are predominantly still taken over by states, United States and China being the biggest in terms of free to play. But at the same time, internet is getting cheaper in various parts of the world. Technology is improving. So there's a lot of local fragmentation happening. Especially in Southeast Asia, I would say at this point of time, where countries like Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, they're really growing, and a lot of player activity is coming up. And in terms of stores or payment providers or getting users connected to the means that they know, not everyone uses credit card, not everyone is on PayPal. So there's a lot of fragmentation happening in developing regions where a lot of local providers are coming up with more opportunities and integrations to reach out to the user base existing there, because certainly they have the technology and the means now. Smartphone are getting cheap. Smartphone is cheaper, I mean, than what it used to be 10 years back, or let's say the buying power is increasing, the purchasing power is increasing. So it's kind of mixed at this point of time, personally, what I see.
That's
I agree. It really depends on where are you looking. Somewhere is really fragmented, and somewhere it's much harder to enter. Like, for example, the quality of the games that is currently expected by the players and the type of the games, it's much harder to develop these games. It takes much higher budget compared to a few years ago. And on the other hand, actually, there are like companies, I don't know, Zynga, that is buying companies one after another, trying to build like a gigantic empire.
That's actually what I wanted to mention as well. Yeah, it really depends which sector that you're looking at. For example, like as the new format, so we're still, like on the journey to get bigger. We want to be the leading company, etc. But maybe, there's going to be consolidating based on how it's going in the future. Yeah, but Zynga.
Yeah, but on the other hand, the Apple versus Epic case, it will have, in my opinion, such a big impact on the industry, and especially monetization. So that's something that we will see new players coming up, helping with the payments and web shops and stuff like that, or existing platforms helping gaming companies like PayPal and Stripe or so on.
Yeah, we just need more like providers, companies to challenge these wall gardens, right? Because it's just pretty difficult to to enter inside their wall.
I think everybody is looking at the case, what will happen. There is something that should happen on December, but we will see if it will not be delayed.
That's a fantastic point, and yes, it's something we've been writing about seemingly endlessly over the last several months. And while it is too early to say, I think everybody is watching, hoping that this might be the start of the first few cracks in that walled garden. Well, we're very nearly out of time, folks. But I have one last question, really for the developers, the game creators out there. I'd like you to try and give one key piece of advice they should consider when creating a game economy. If you could give them one thing to take away from this afternoon, what would it be? Michal, let's start with you first.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, learn from the biggest, most successful companies. They have existing economies, and then do a simulation of the economy before the launch. So you can simulate how players will go through the game, years of the gameplay, simulate this and watch multiple segments, how they are behaving, and adjust the economy according to that. And do not continue with the global launch, like continue with this process as ongoing thing.
Lean iteration. It's a good one. It's a good one. Dmitri.
Yeah. So I think the common mistake I've seen in smaller companies is that they tend to over-design their product and always start to invent their own meta gameplay loops and monetization. If you're a small team, there's a high chance that you don't have enough expertise in monetization. And it's not that bad to copy a monetization loop from other games if you understand that they apply to your game. And because of that, I recommend to look at the core valuables of your gameplay, as I've talked before, and to think what monetization loops from other games apply to it. That's it if you're a smaller team. If you're a bigger team, of course, you have to you should invent something new, but you have to iterate and test it, like Michal said. Yeah, that's my advice.
Fabulous. Chloe, let's hear from you next.
So for me, would be like know your target players, put their experience first when you design the economy. Yeah, I think that's the most important thing.
Put your players first. Yep, absolutely spot on. And Peeyush.
I absolutely agree. Everyone said the right points. If I would sum up, I would say start with your player motivation and drive it along the way and craft it as it grows.
Fabulous. Fabulous stuff. Well, that is us out of time, I'm afraid, folks. We overran ever so slightly. It's such a huge area. It's such a complex and in-depth one that I think for me, the key takeaway is there's no one size fits all anymore. It's you have to know your players, you have to be able to test your assumptions, and you have to keep that focus on the players and giving them value. I'd like to thank you all, Michal, Dmitri, Chloe, and Peeyush. That was phenomenal. We scratched the surface, but please, if you have an opportunity to hang out on the Discord channel, or if you have people trying to talk to you on Meet to Match, please do take the time, because it is something that's only going to become more fundamental to the long-term success of your games. So that's us. Peggy, I'm not sure if you're coming back or if we can all now disappear to the pub.
I'd love to go to the pub.
Wouldn't we all? We can all come round.
Indeed, we could all do that. And I'm just about up to beer o'clock over here, so I wouldn't mind that at all. Fantastic panel. And you've also made us all very excited thinking about what's going to happen in December. It looks like it's going to be monumental and impactful as well for your panel. So yeah, great. Absolutely. And I'll just let you go to the pub or wherever, Brian, with your panel and thank everyone and close us off. So thanks again.
Thank
you very much.
Really
Thank you,
appreciate your
guys.
time to join
Thank
us.
you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thank
Good
you.
day. Bye.
Bye now.